Hello and welcome to another tutorial. So this time round we are going to be continuing to extend the doors project that's set up quite a while ago. And one of the things that going to be adding to this is support for the doors being essentially in a manual mode. This was something that was requested. So previously the way the doors worked is they were, I can just easily demonstrate it, the doors were automatic. So you would walk up near them and they would just go and open. That would happen automatically. So I could walk over here, door opens, and then when I move away from it, it closes. So that's the mode that they're currently set up to be working in. And if we take a look in the scene view, we'll see if we select one of the doors, there's just a volume there. So they're currently working in that automatic mode. And the thing that was requested was, as I said, the manual mode. So the idea behind the manual mode is that when you walk up to the door, there should actually be a prompt to interact with it, to tell that door to actually open or close. So I'm going to get that set up. The first thing I'm going to do, because I want the actual door logic to support both fully. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually duplicate this set of doors. And what I will do is I will actually move them there, I think. So they'll be behind where the player is. And so these, I'll just refer to these as the manual ones. So each one of these. So I won't create a separate prefab for this. This will just be a different configuration option. Once it's working, I might create a separate prefabs for them at that point. But for now, I think I'll just keep them as the exact same prefab, but just with a different configuration option there. So, okay, let's think about how we want this to work. What I want to have happen is an option there on the doors that I essentially say, okay, their mode is manual. But let's think a little bit about that. So, okay, I go and I have to press to interact to open the door. What then happens when it closes? Do I have to interact again to make it close? Do I have to have it go automatic for closing? How do I want that to work? And there's a couple of different options there for that, because I might want it to require manual opening, and I might want it to support manual closing, but I also might want to have it just automatically close. So there's a few different sort of options that I want there for this. So what I'm going to do is go to our door controller, and I'm going to have a new enum here, and this will be the door mode. So we'll have fully automatic, which is the current mode that it's been working in. So current mode, where it's using that volume, is fully automatic. Initially, I'm going to have support for it being fully manual. So I won't have that sort of intermediate state where it needs to be able to be told, okay, manual for opening and support manual closing, but also support closing after a time. I just want to have it be fully manual as the option there. So, okay, let's set up a serialize field here, and we'll have our door mode, and we'll have mode, and we'll default that to fully automatic. So that's a good starting point. So first things we want to do here is we've got our sort of trigger handling side of things. So if the door mode is fully manual, then we just return. There's nothing we actually do at that point, because entering that trigger volume should not cause anything to happen there. Then the next thing I want to do is when we exit that, we also should just do nothing if the door mode is fully manual. So we still support being able to have these external requests come through, because that allows us to still do things like a button or another trigger volume, so we can still support some options there. So that's good. So I can go and modify these 3 doors, and I will change their mode to fully manual. Okay, we've configured our prefabs there. We've set the manual option on them. Now I need to think about that prompt that we want to show, because depending upon what you're wanting stylistically for your game, there's a lot of different ways you might want to approach this. So in some games, you might want this to appear as more of a HUD element, so something that's there in the screen space. Other games, you might want this to actually be something where it is in world space, so it's anchored to the door itself. So there's a lot of different options there, and I want to be cautious of not locking people into a particular way of doing this. So what I'm going to do is have it that the actual UI for this is separate and that it hooks into it. So what I will do is I'm going to set it up as it will be UI that is in the HUD. So I'm going to create, and I'll put this actually not under that UI folder. I'm going to, and this is something where if you had your own separate sort of canvas already, you might want to add it as a separate thing there. In this case, I'm going to set up so I have door UI. I'm going to create the canvas under that, and that will set it to scale with screen size, use the same defaults I generally use of 1920 by 1080. And then we'll start creating the different sections. So I usually will have a panel. So we'll have a door prompt. And we do want that to be centered, but we don't want it to be being stretched. So we might make that, say, 200 by 100. And then we'll change the tinting of that. Add in some text. So this will be press E to open. So we can clean up how that actually looks. Might need to tweak the font size a little bit. Tweak the scaling and positioning of all of this. That looks pretty good. So, okay, I'm pretty happy with that as just sort of a basic prompt there for that. We'll call that prompt text. And I will actually give this its own sort of specific separate script. So I'll have UI door prompt. The reason for this is it just allows me to wrap this to have it be something that is then doing all of the management of things. So what I will do is we will bring in Text Mesh Pro. We'll have a serialized field for the Text Mesh Pro UGUI. Prompt text. This prompt could be as a prompt to open or a prompt to close. So that's something where we are going to want to have a function here, public void show prompt. And is open. So we can have different text for open or closed. So the prompt text would be set to, in this case, if it is open, I'm going to go for press E to close. Otherwise, we go for press E to open. Now, we could also be linking in and grabbing what the particular key is, so there's further options we could do there. We could also have these as text that we define here. So we could have the open prompt like this to make it a bit easier to further customize it. And we'd have a similar thing for a close prompt. So if it's already open, we show the close prompt. If it's otherwise, we show the open prompt. And we want to be able to be turning the panel sort of off and on. So what I would do is I would have a thing for accessing the panel. So what I would generally do is this is where I would use a canvas group. So prompt canvas group. So that then when we're actually showing it, for now, all I'll do is the alpha setting that to 1. What we could also do is we could set up animations, things like that, to have it smoothly fade in. In this case, I'm just going to have it be a very sort of hard cutoff of showing it or hiding it. So we'll have hide prompt. So that will do a similar sort of thing, but alpha is 0. On start, we'll force it to 0. So that's good. So we can get that linked up. This will give us something that we can then prefab this, and this can actually be something that then you could use it for world space UI or use it for screen space UI like we're currently doing. It gives us a few different options there with it. What I will do is I will turn off it being a raycast target, and we'll do that for the text as well. Less of an issue with text, definitely an issue with panels. And the canvas itself, I'm actually going to remove the graphics raycaster from it because we don't actually need that on it. So that looks good. We've got that linked up. We will add the canvas group. Again, turning off the raycast, turning off the interactable stuff. We don't need to link to any of that. So that's good. That gives us our door prompt UI. So I'm just going to drag that in. So, okay, we've got a prompt that we can show. And I will actually modify that so the alpha defaults to 0 so we don't see it. So, okay, we've got a prompt that we can show. We've got the ability for being able to have that display different things. So that's good. So the door controller, this is where the door controller, we want it to be able to indicate whether that prompt should be showing or not. So what I'm going to do, and if we think about how we probably want this to work, is when you're in that trigger volume, we can go for initially the simple approach of if you're in that trigger volume, it can tell it to show the prompt. If you're not in the trigger volume, then it can hide the prompt. So I'll actually change this around a little bit so that the tag filtering still actually happens and still happens first. But in manual mode, what I do is when I enter that trigger volume, then I'm going to have on show door interaction prompt. We invoke that, and I want to check, okay, if the door is open, I should show the closing prompt. So essentially, this will get hooked into this show prompt function. So I need to be passing in if the door is currently open. So what I would consider for that is, okay, if the door state, and this could be handy to actually set up a property for. So I'm going to actually create up here a public bool is open or opening. Then to check that, that'll be the case if the current state is open or if the current state is opening. And then we'll have a similar one is closed or closing. And that will follow a very similar process of it will match to if it's closed or if the current state is equal to closing. Now, we're not using the closed or closing at the moment, but we've added in one, might as well add in the other. So is door is open or opening. So that's good, which that'll control showing the prompt. Then we do a similar thing with this. So we check the tags again. We still have all of that logic for earlying out. And then this is going to go on hide door interaction prompt invoke. So, okay, we've got two events that we need to set up. So we'll bring in Unity Engine events. So the main reason for setting it up like this is I'm trying to have it decoupled from the UI to make it easier for people being able to do the UI in whatever way you actually want to for it. So I think that's always a good thing to try and make sure we're sort of supporting things like of that. So we'll have a Unity event that has a bool. So we set that up. And then we have another one that does not have any bool, and that is on hide. So if we hook those events up, that should actually be enough for us being able to set these up, have it properly connected. So that's good. Now what I could do is, again, there's different ways I could set this up. I could manually link these things up, or what I could do is in start, F the door mode, FR mode is fully manual. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find that door prompt, because we should really only have sort of one of that, but this is something where it might be part of the actual door. So I could also cache that, and that could be a handy thing to do, of having here let us allow us to actually link to it, but also allow the option for discovery of it. So door prompt UI. So that's null to start off with. And what I would do is here, I will only search for it if it's null. So the reason for structuring it this way is if I'm doing world space, I would actually build this into the prefab and I would just have it already linked up. If I'm not doing world space, then it likely means I'm doing the HUD version of it, which means I'd only have a single instance of this, so finding the object is going to be a valid option. So this then becomes like that. And then what I would do is if we've found it, then we're going to link up these different events. So on show door interaction prompt, we'll add a listener, and the listener will be door prompt UI show prompt. We do a similar thing for the hide. So on hide door interaction prompt and hide prompt. So that means we're just making it a little bit easier for being able to sort of drop this in and be able to directly use it. That makes our life a little bit easier. The only thing we sort of need to specifically link up here is if we were actually manually setting that door prompt UI, then we would want to be linking up these. So I might actually change the order of these things around so that these are placed after it, and make this clear that this is manual door prompt. Or actually, yeah. So we make it a little bit clearer that it's not necessarily something you're always needing to set, that it is purely optional doing this link up, that if you've just got it present in the actual world, it'll be able to find it and connect to it. So let's test this out. What I want to see happen is, so these ones are automatic doors. So I walk over to these, no prompt, nothing like that happening. These ones, I walk over and I get the prompt, including my wonderful typo. So that's working. And I'll fix up my typo. And that'll actually be a typo in the code as well. So let's make sure we fix that up. So, okay, that's good. We're at the point now where we can show the prompt. What we want to do is we want to actually have it be sending through the particular request. So this, again, becomes a little bit of a tricky thing of, okay, where do we go and put this logic? And it's something that it is going to be so specific to your particular setup, because you might have a character controller that already has a lot of stuff mapped. So this is using the character controller I've set up. It has some very basic stuff in it. And if we take a look at the actual input configuration, it does already have an interact one bound. And that is already bound, we can see, to a bunch of different things. That's already configured. So, okay, we have things there already hooked up for doing interaction. So it would be nice to be able to make use of that. It does mean then that we're actually going and modifying our existing character controller though, which that may not always be an option. And so this has different inputs here. I don't think this has got, it doesn't have the interact key actually hooked up to it. So that's an issue there where we need to be funneling stuff through, and this is sort of one of the challenges that you can actually hit into with this of, okay, where do we set this up? How do we make this work? In this case, I'm using the new input system. You might be not using the new input system, so that makes it trickier. So figuring out good ways of linking that stuff together is, again, as I said, it's very dependent on your actual sort of setup. What I'm going to do, and this is going to be a little bit specific to this, but we'll try and have it, be, I guess, as close as possible to something that's easy to go and use, is I'm going to have a on interact seeing as that's already set up. And it functions similar to the on settings here. And what I will do is I will set up a event that gets broadcast. So on interact pressed, and I'll go for invoke. So I'm just going to set this up here as another Unity event, which we already sort of do with things like the settings, so it kind of fits with how this character controller is set up, but again, needs to be dependent upon your particular sort of setup of what's going to work best for yours. So, okay, that, again, there's the thing of figuring out, okay, where do we send that to? I'm going to, I think in this case, I've kind of got two different areas of where I could send it to. It won't know which door I'm necessarily in, so that's a problem. I can't just go and send it to the particular door. I could broadcast it to all doors, but that's not great. Ideally, this is where you might end up needing something like a door manager. I think because the prompt is probably best placed for actually sending this, what I'm going to do is make it that the prompt has this actual capability. So interact, I'm going to call this interact requested. So I'll have that. Our character motor has that event, so we can set this up then of, okay, we've got our interact pressed. I'll link up our door UI. And then what I will do is I will link that to interact requested. And for now, with this, I'm going to just put in a log for interact. So, okay, let's test this out. What I should find is I don't even need to be at a door, and I can, if I press the mouse button, we can see the interact message. Now we do get 2 ones coming through there. What that likely is going to be down to the input configuration here. So if we check the settings, 1 is a button. Interact has been set up slightly differently. You'll notice settings doesn't have any custom interaction modifiers. This one's set to be giving both trigger and release. So I will actually change that to just remove it. And we just save that. And what we should find is we only get a single one of those now, which we do. So that's good. Same with mouse and keyboard. Excellent. So now we're ready to link this up and to have it actually doing what it needs to. Okay, so we have things at the point where that interact information is coming through to the UI prompt. So we're pretty close to being able to have this actually causing the manual opening of the doors. But this needs to know which door to actually talk to. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to make it that the function that gets called here for showing the prompt is also actually going to provide the door controller. So we'll have current door. So then I will keep track here of door controller, current door is null. That also means with the actual door controller here, our event is going to change. And we also pass in the door controller, which means we need to update our code down here. So that passes in that and itself. So now this has enough information where what we can do is say current door. is equal to that. So we've linked things up there. Now we know, okay, what door we're talking to. We can do a check here just in case. If the current door is null, we return. When we hide the prompt, well, what I would do is I would say current door is null. So that's good, because hiding the prompt should get rid of the particular door that we're trying to talk to, just so we don't accidentally send the wrong command to the wrong thing. So then when we go and request that interaction, so if the current door, remember we added in this is open or opening, then what I would do is go current door, request close, and the close request has come from this game object. Otherwise, we would do a request open. So that should pretty much work. That should allow us to manually open and close a door. Now we do want to check if we need to do any relinking up of, well, we didn't manually link up the event, so that actually should mean we're fine. We can test this out now and see, does it actually work? So let's run this. And okay. So I'm going to head over to one of the doors here. We get the prompt. Press the interact. It opens. This door here. Let's open it. So far so good. This one we should find exactly the same. Now we do notice that the prompt doesn't really sort of change until we've had it close and reopen. Well, essentially we've had the prompt hide and show. But that's working. But we see, while it does actually change the function, the particular behavior of it doesn't update. So that's something where what we would need to do is, if we're in this fully manual mode, then we have this sort of on opening completed and on closing completed. So what I would do is here, if the mode is fully manual, then we just make sure we update that. Now this might not be valid to show it if the character is still not inside that trigger. So that starts to make it a little bit sort of trickier, but we can check when we do this request open, we would still have stuff in the held open by. So what I could do is, if the on opening is completed and held open by count is greater than 0. So that would be a reasonable thing for updating it. We can then do the exact same logic for on closing completed. And that should mean that we do get it properly updating. So we'll just test that. So two things we want to check here is, does it properly update if I just walk up to the door? So it does, so that's good. Now that scenario didn't update. So what I want to check is, okay, held open by, because we've request close, that's actually not properly sort of triggering there. So we want to see what's happening with that, because we did get the closed message, but because that removes things from that requester, that sort of makes it a little bit trickier because it's still actually in the bounds. So we probably need a better way of actually doing this. So what I would say is, and I'll change the on opening one as well. we need to sort of think about how we actually want this to work, and to work in a little bit of a better way of sort of operating there. So what I could do is provide an event here for when it's actually changed state. So what I would have is in the door controller, we will give this a serialize field unity event, another bool, and door controller, and we'll say on door state changed. So this will actually add a listener to that for the prompt. So we'll have door prompt UI, door state changed. Now we haven't set up that function yet, but what this will do is we'll go over to our UI door prompt, have a public void, and it's very similar to show prompt. It's got the same inputs there, but what I want to check is, okay, if the current door is equal to this one, and current door is not equal to null, then I want to update the prompt text. So I'm just making sure that the messages come through for this actual door, and that it's not going to accidentally be sending stuff through for incorrect things. So what this would allow me to do is, we've got stuff here for checking the target state, for checking the current state. So here we update this. So what I would do is invoke, and we would have is door, or is open or opening, and this. So we do that in the different ones. We would also do that here for when we change to these particular states. So this should now mean that we actually do get that prompt updating reliably, and we should in general find we run into a lot less issues with it. So if I head over, it immediately changes, so that's good. The other thing I want to check is if I move away, prompt hides, come back, it's correct. Now this door is working, we open it. So we do find that if we rapidly, and it might be that we're just moving out of the volumes, but it does seem to have cases where, okay, it's sort of hiding and showing. So here, it's not visible. Here it is. So we're getting a little bit of inconsistency if we have doors really close to each other, which we might have. So that's something where it's definitely not behaving quite right there. So what we could take a look is, and what it might be, is just the actual location of these volumes here might be managing to have, and yes, so probably what's happening is these are so close that these volumes are causing us to get a enter event and a close event for the same UI. That's likely what we're finding is happening. So we could make some changes here for this, that here the hide prompt could check what the current door is. So there's different things we could do there with that. I think that's something where I would actually be inclined not to fix this in code. I think this is something where those volumes, we've actually just got those volumes a little bit too close. So I would actually be inclined to change those colliders and to shrink those down a little bit. I think that would actually be a better change there so that the player can't be in the bounds of two of these doors at the same point in time. I think allowing them to be in the same one like that is not a good idea. Fine when we were doing automatic opening, but when we're doing the actual prompt showing, so that sorts out the issue. It reliably is hiding and showing then for these. Now, I would also extend, in particular for these manual doors, I would actually extend these out further because we're finding we're having to be really, really, really close to the actual door to have a kick in, and I think we're having to be too close. So I would make it a decent chunk bigger. So now when I head over to these, it should show that feels a bit of a better time. That's a much better sort of setup for it. So that's good. So it's working from a point of view of fully manual for telling it to open and close. What about something where it's manual, but we can have it just close after a time? So what I'm going to do is have a manual with automatic close as an option. So then we'll have serialize field, auto close time, and we might say after 3 seconds. And we're going to need to keep track here of, okay, a float auto close time remaining, which will set that to -1. So how this would work is if the door is manual, which I'm going to create a bool here, bool is manual, and we'll check if the mode is fully manual or if the manual is automatic closing side of things. So this allows me to go and check is manual. So I do encourage setting up helper properties like this. It makes life a lot easier. Also means that you can go and make that logic more complicated later if you need to. You can add additional conditions, which is always handy. So, okay, in update here, at the end of all of this, if the automatic, so the auto close time remaining, if that is greater than 0, then we'll decrease it. That gets set like that. And then if the auto close time remaining is less than or equal to 0, and so it only will start this, I would say, if held open by count is 0. So if there's anything blocking the door, we don't start the timer. Once something is, we don't update the timer. As soon as it's not, then we can just go and do request close. And the requesting close thing, so held open by, that means something's completely sort of left it. I'll pass in a null in this case because we know there's nothing holding it open, so we're not matching anything. So that looks good. Now we will have a couple of other changes for here. So in the on trigger enter, that needs to check if it is manual. This one also checks if it is manual. Now, what we want to be doing here is we don't want it to request close at this point, but if the mode is the manual with automatic close, then we set that time, so automatic close time remaining is the auto close time. What this will mean is that when we leave that volume, it will start that timer for it actually closing. Now, as soon as we do a request close, we will actually set this to -1, just so that we're not inadvertently setting that timer when we shouldn't be. So I'm going to change all of these doors to fully manual with automatic close. And what I will find is so I can head over to these doors. I can open them. Now, if I wait, nothing will happen. I can still manually close them. But if I open it and then move away, then after a short time, we should find that it goes and tries to close it. Now, we're not seeing it kick off the close there. So at the moment, this logic is actually going to head into a bit of a problem, because held open by is never actually going to go to empty with the manual doors, even when we've moved out of the area. Because when we move out of the area, we don't actually run the request close. We set this timer and everything, but we don't go and actually do the rest. So we kind of need to make sure that we are properly handling this. So what I'm going to actually do is when we enter trigger, firstly, at that point, it's going to invalidate the auto closing. We're going to check here if the held open by count is 1 and the thing holding it open, if that is the door prompt UI. So we check a few different things here. So if we're being held open and if the only thing holding us open is the door prompt UI, and we actually have a valid auto close time. So that gives us a few different things we're checking there. And then when we do the request close, we would do that. So .gameObject. So we would request the proper close there. So that is looking a little bit better. We are making sure that when we enter the trigger, we clear that. When we go to exit, we are properly setting that auto close time. So that looks a lot closer to what we would need this to actually do. So, okay, let's test that out. And we'll see. We'll head over to one of the doors. So head over here, we open it. Now, nothing should happen at this particular point. We should be able to manually close it. All of that works as expected. Now let's move out of the way of it. And it should be ticking down the timer. But we can see that we're not getting it ticking that down. So what we're going to do is we're going to set a breakpoint in here, firstly, just to see if this is ever actually firing. And importantly, we want to also set one when we're actually setting things up for that. So we'll add in our breakpoints and we'll run this. So none of those should fire initially. do see we've got one there in update. We'll get rid of that and let everything run. So we head over to our door and we tell it to open. None of those breakpoints hit. I'm going to move out of the bounds. So, okay, hides the prompt. So that's good. And then we can see, okay, the mode is correct. That's going to set that auto close time remaining. It's going to set it to 3 seconds. That looks good. So we know which particular door we're running. This is one of the manual sliding doors. So this is where I would put a breakpoint here. So we can see at the moment the held open by is the door prompt. We'll make sure this is the correct thing. So that's good. So everything there is looking correct. So we'll run until update fires again. Now we'll notice this is not actually firing our update. And the reason is what we'll see is the target state is the current state. So what we've done is we've put things in the wrong spot. So what I would do is likely all we need to do is take this logic and move this up to the very start. So we'll run, head over to our doors and let it open. There's nothing happening yet causing it to automatically close. We'll step out of the volume and after a few seconds, automatically closes. Prompt correctly updates. If we back out, then move back in, it won't go and close. But if we move back out again and then wait a few seconds, then it does. So, okay, that's looking good. We do want to check, okay, what about these doors here? And we do get a null reference error. So we want to make sure that we don't fully break these doors. So we can see held open by was actually null. So if we look at held open by, there was a count, and we didn't actually have, we also didn't have a door prompt UI. So what I would be checking is also that door prompt UI is not equal to null. We just make sure we're properly checking all of the scenarios. So we'll double check that again, make sure we haven't broken the automatic doors because we don't want to break them. So we wander up to that. It behaves correctly. Triggers work correctly for that as well. These work for opening and closing. And the state properly updates. So that's good. Handles us spamming the message, which is good. So that looks good. We've got our manual doors working. And we'll check all of these different ones. Those look good. Now, one thing we do notice is, so these manual doors, this pair, when we're on that side, opens that way. When we're on this side, it still opens the same way. So what's happening there is that sense of, and if we look at the door, we've got this in forwards mode option and whether facing matters. So if we take a look, when we go to check this, it's looking at the vector to the opener. And because the opener is the prompt, that means that it's going and getting the wrong position there. So what I would do in that case, and I think the only place where we check that is in the open one. Let's just double check that. We just want to make sure. Yeah, so the only place where that gets checked is here. So what I would do is have a check here of F held open by is that door prompt UI. So we'll also need to check if that door prompt UI is valid. If that's the case. And then what I could do is get the camera location. Now, the reason I'm doing it this way is that if an AI is using it, the AI will be there as the held open by, and that will have a position. If it's something where it's coming from a player, it's specifically going to be, we could use the camera location. So we'll have a vector3 opener position, which I'll set like this. So we default to whoever's opening it, but if the opener is the UI, then the opener position will use camera main transform position. So we just switch over to using the camera. That should mean then that for those manual doors, it actually works correctly still with the facing direction. So let's test that out. This one here, we open it, close it from that side, so it's correct. For this one, and it's back to working the way that we want it to. We'll double check and make sure this is still correct. So we did get a error there. So what we missed was that should have been just door prompt UI. So always good to, when you add in different options, make sure you are checking all of the different scenarios. So that works. That's good. And this one also still works. And it'll auto close. So that's good. So we have our set of doors working. We have the ability to have them work in a automatic mode. We have the ability for them to work in a manual mode. We also have manual with an automatic closing happening there, and that's working quite nicely. And we've got it so that it can handle UI being present there, in this case as a HUD object, but with how it's been set up, it would be able to be made to work with a world space 1 as well. So we've tried to keep it nice and flexible there. And that's been the big thing with it. So dive on in and experiment with this. If there is additional sort of bits of functionality and features that you would like to see added to this, then chuck those in a comment below. Always keen to hear areas where there might be additionally useful things that you'd like to see with this. Those are things that I'd really be keen to know about, so I can get those added in. Thanks folks, hope you found the video interesting and helpful. If you have, chuck in a like and subscribe, it really helps out, it's really appreciated. If you're looking for the code for the project, the code is available up on GitHub. There is a link to that in the description below as well. And if you have any questions or other things you'd like to see me cover in videos, chuck those in a comment below. And if you're looking for other ways to support the channel, I do have a Patreon, and there is a link to that in the description also. But until next time,